Good morning, and thank you for joining me today for this Developing Partnerships, Collaborations and Consortia webinar. We have got a few people signed up this morning, so as they're joining, I will just go through some general housekeeping. We are on Zoom today, so please do feel free to ask questions, discuss the topics throughout. We are doing a really high-level, quick canter through partnerships, consortia and collaboration this morning. So there is a lot to cover. Everything that you see on the slides and a copy of the recording will be shared to all registered attendees. So feel free to make some notes if you want to, but everything you see this morning will be sent out to you. What we'll be covering in the session today is collaborative working. Where do you start? What are the benefits? We're going to have a look into how to choose a partner. Then we'll think about structuring a consortia, crunching the numbers, managing risk, and the foundations to good collaboration. My name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of 3 co-founders of a micro-social enterprise called Go for Growth. And our job is to work with the public sector and the marketplace to try and help support especially smaller and voluntary sector providers to take part in public sector opportunities. And whilst I'm running the session this morning, all credit and thanks must continue to go to Dr. Jane Lynch of Cardiff University, who has supported us in these sessions before and who's kindly given us so much of today's information on collaboration and partnership working. Please do feel free to link in with Jane on LinkedIn and have a look at Cardiff Business School and the work that they're doing on collaborative working. So we are on Zoom today, but we do always want these sessions, and especially this session, to be as interactive as possible. So if you do want to ask a question, please feel free to do so. If you'd also like to say hi and introduce yourself, you absolutely can. If you want to put some information into the chat, we will share those chats with all registered attendees, and that's really just so we can help connect businesses to each other. So if you are looking to partner with somebody else, please do feel free to use this session only if you want to, and only if you want your information shared in the chat. What we are asking you to share, if you want to, is your business name, your name, what sector your business is in, where you're located, or where you're looking for a partner if they differ, any contact details that you'd like to be used, and if you want to, a brief overview of your business. Again, it's not mandatory, but it is there if you would like to use it and to get your business known by others. I have set some time aside for questions at the end, but the session really is to try and give an overview of what's involved in collaboration consortia. So we're going to talk about partnerships, possibly forming a consortia of some kind, thinking about collaborations. We're going to focus in some way, shape or form on working with other businesses to secure opportunities and when this might be an appropriate route to take. So I think some of the key questions, first of all, to think about is how you would like to grow your business. And if growth is your main aim as a business, have you already considered collaborating with other small business leaders, other sector enterprises, other charities, for example? Is that why you're here today? And it might seem a bit of a strange question, especially as this is an event dedicated to working with others. But quite often we find it can feel like it's in the too difficult space, or it's challenging to wrap our heads around how it might affect our ability to compete in what can often be crowded marketplaces. So I ask if you've ever heard of a supplier consortium, and what we mean by a supplier consortium at its most basic form actually is that it's more than one organisation coming together in some way, shape or form. In fact, some consortia can involve multiples of businesses, up to 7 we've seen, and businesses of different sizes. So it doesn't always have to be all small businesses, all third sector enterprises, all charities coming together. You can have almost a multi-cohort of businesses, but to work in collaboration or in a consortia of some sort, a consortium, then it's more than one business coming together. And I guess the question that we're all asking ourselves around collaboration is, would we like to improve our chances of securing higher value public sector contracts? There is a real drive from the public sector to access the whole of the marketplace. And of course, the vast majority of businesses, so 5.5 million businesses in the United Kingdom, 99.2% of them are small organisations. But it still remains that it can be more difficult for small and medium enterprises and the voluntary sector organisations to compete. And sometimes that's because smaller organisations don't meet the selection criteria or the turnover required to take part and qualify for opportunities. And sometimes actually that can be a resources thing as well. One of the reasons to collaborate may simply be to improve your chances of securing those higher value public contracts, as well as mitigating and spreading risk, understanding and managing complexity better, and to bring in skills or goods and services to a contract that you may not have under your own business remit. And so there are some key questions that we probably ask ourselves or should ask ourselves when we're thinking about collaboration. And the first question is, why collaborate? What are the other options are there to help me grow my business if I don't collaborate? Some of the myths around collaboration is that it's easygoing, that anybody can do it. And actually, there is an element of truth to that. Anybody can collaborate, but it's not necessarily something that you drop into without some real planning and foresight at play. Collaborating in business is a whole different ball game to collaborating in our personal lives, where it probably comes just that bit more naturally to us. However, in no way, shape or form is it insurmountable at all. But it does require senior buy-in. And if you're a small organisation, you may be the senior buy-in. It requires investment in time, certainly in the upfront stages. And it's important for us to understand why we're going to collaborate. What's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this collaboration? What will everybody get out of this collaboration? And some of the reasons might be these other points that we see on the screen. So if joint working is part of your strategy, you might ask yourself, is it part of my strategy already? Or actually, would I need to develop and work it into and embed it into our long-term or medium to long-term strategy in order for this to work? Because it might lead you to new supply networks, for example. It might lead you to new business opportunities. It might help you to fill a skill that you don't currently have in your business. It could help you with logistics. It could help you with IT, some of those skills gaps if you have them. And these are common reasons why businesses decide to collaborate in the first place. And we'll consider what our current mission is. What are my organization's goals? What are my organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities to collaborate? How will a partnership help my business to grow? And it's a really, really important point, but probably even more important than all of those is, are we ready to collaborate? And collaboration, I guess, in its most primitive form, is a process of managing relationships. Collaborative working is a process for managing relationships in a better or a different way. And it requires a certain set of behaviours. So on the cultural side of things, it's really important to consider how your culture will embrace or work with a collaborative approach to a part of the business, the whole of the business, etc. And we're going to think about whether we need that senior level buy-in. And if we do need it, we're probably not going to be able to commit the time to make the collaboration work if we haven't got that senior level buy-in. So we should think about structure. We're going to think about what kind of consortia or consortium we should set up. We're going to go through that, a little bit of that later. There are different options, and I'll talk you through a couple of those options in a few slides' time. What Cardiff University and Dr. Jane Lynch always recommend, and we agree with this wholeheartedly in Go for Growth, is that you start these conversations at least 6 months in advance of a contract opportunity becoming available, because it takes at least that amount of time to form a relationship. As we know, just in life, relationships take time, trust takes time to develop. So we need to start having these conversations as early as we can. If you try and rush it, it's likely that the chance of not being successful is higher. So we're going to encourage you to think about collaboration very much as a long-term strategy, a medium-term strategy at the very least. So what are the benefits of working together? Here are some of the ideas on the screen. As we know, there is a phrase, isn't there? The two heads are better than one. And it's there for a reason. Being self-employed, being a small organization, a micro business, it can often be a bit of a lonely place. It can feel like a lonely place, particularly coming out of the pandemic. And I know we're a few years past the COVID-19 pandemic, but there are businesses and sectors that are still in recovery from the pandemic. And that pandemic actually has really been one of the drivers for lots of businesses to think about what can I do differently with my business so that I don't get so badly affected next time. And of course, there will be a next time of some sort. We just don't necessarily know what it is. So our question to ourselves is, how resilient is my business? How can I build in that resilience? And is Consortium a way of doing that? It's an opportunity for us, I guess, to look outside of our business. And if we think about the financial crash in the third quarter of 2007, early 2008, you'd see signs on businesses on the high street saying closed due to recession. And of course, it was, what that means is it was closed due to cash flow problems. And we didn't see that recession coming. Like COVID, we didn't see COVID coming. And even though if we look back now, there were lots of indicators that it was happening, we just didn't necessarily anticipate that it would affect us in the way that it did. So I think what we're learning is we can no longer be, if we ever were, complacent in our business, and we constantly have to look outside of our business and be really aware of that macro environmental challenge and those things that might potentially risk our business. And consortium, collaboration, partnership working can be one of the ways that we shear off some of that risk. But one of the greatest challenges is thinking about who might be the right partner. It's probably even harder to now meet and build relationships with other businesses when we're living so much of our lives in the metaverse, the virtual world. And actually, this event is a virtual event. We are using technology to hopefully try and bring businesses together. We hope that some people will use this event a bit like a business card almost, if you've popped your details into the chat. We've run a number of these events now, and some of them have actually gone on to create really good partnerships where businesses have, are working towards applying for opportunities on their own, with others. And if you do find yourself in a collaborative arrangement and would like to feed back to us about how you found it, whether any of the advice and guidance was useful, or if there were any challenges in there that we can build into this kind of webinar, then please do let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. So we obviously need to think really carefully about who we want to work with in the future. And most importantly, we're going to think about what value they're going to bring to our business. So the SWOT framework is a really commonly used and usually well-known framework. You may well be familiar with it. It's one of the most widely used frameworks that there is, and it's very good for understanding collaboration. It's a really useful tool to use to start off a collaborative partnership arrangement. So in essence, first off, basically, you would identify, first of all, as an individual organization, what your strengths and weaknesses are. Your strengths then become your opportunities, and your weaknesses, if not addressed, can become your threats. So ideally, what you're looking at thinking about is who might be your partner, and you're looking at a complementary set of strengths. What we want to try and do in collaboration is exploit those strengths so they become opportunities. And we need to look for a partner who will help us address some of those weaknesses. And if we don't quite get that right, it can lead to problems later on. If we're collaborating with the same strengths, we can end up competing against each other rather than cooperating with each other. So we need to think carefully about how we use this matrix or a matrix like this to help us find the right partner. But if we can capture what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are, find businesses that have complementary strengths and will help us offset those weaknesses, then that should be a strong start for collaboration. And so when we think about structuring the consortium, if we're thinking about working with more than one organisation to make us contract ready, to open up all of those opportunities and to help us grow in business, then this particular model could be useful. And the model that I'm talking about is called the lead body model. It's well known in industry. You may well be familiar with it already. And it's one which is a highly recommended model that you can use. And the reason for that is it does give the structure that it needs, and it also speaks the language of collaboration. In collaboration, some of the experience that Dr. Jane Lynch tells us about through her experience in collaborative working is that people say where it goes wrong is that there's an imbalance of power. You've always got somebody who makes all of the decisions and everybody else follows. But with the lead body model, you have a lead body organization. That might be the organization who has the highest turnover. It might be the organization who has the most strengths. It might be the organization who found the opportunity in the first place. Whatever the lead body can be, anybody. But when it comes to decision making, you have a steering group. So one member of the consortium has one vote. So that makes sure that everybody is responsible equally for making decisions about what consortium gets involved in, how it's run, how it's managed, etc. And that's important. So in a lead body model, the public sector can only contract with one legal entity. And so if you're working on the lead body model, the lead body would be that legal entity that would actually be where the contract is entered into. However, your steering group would make sure that all consortia partners have an equal role within the collaborative partnership. So if you think about, for example, things like overhead costs. If you are looking to tender for public sector contracts, the public sector will award to the one legal entity, but there would be inevitably an administrative overhead cost to the collaboration, the consortium itself. And that shouldn't necessarily be absorbed in an imbalanced way. The cost of that could be spread and split between each consortium member that's reflective of input, reflective of that equality in the relationship, etc. That should give you a feel of a little bit of how lead body tries to work. There is, just to say, a ton of free information on collaborative working on the Welsh Government website. So if you just type into a search engine, Joint Bidding Wales, you'll come out with the guidance that's available. It's really good guidance, so please feel free to have a look at that. What's really important is the relationship between the lead body organisation. They sort of purely become the central point of contact, the main point of contact, if you will. But ultimately, for the rest of the decisions that the consortium is making, they will be shared and agreed equally. And that's a really important point to make. So a lead body model with that steering group can really help share risk, share decision making, so that the whole consortium moves as one. Even though you have a lead body and a lead legal entity, that doesn't mean that all roads lead to that one organisation. I'll pick another model really quickly to work through. So the SPV, or special purpose vehicle model. This is probably used for collaborations which are more well established. It's when a consortium becomes a legal entity in and of itself, so that the individual organisations effectively continue trading as their own organisation, and a percentage of that business is then managed through the consortium. The SPV is the model that Go for Growth has taken. So the special purpose vehicle, I can vouch for being an effective model to use. Go for Growth is a collaboration between two organisations, All Things Procurement and Net Positive Futures. And our SPV is Go for Growth. Go for Growth is a legal entity in and of itself. And those two other organisations continue to run independently, but we share directors. So we have 3 directors of Go for Growth, both of which are directors of those two separate businesses, who come together to run Go for Growth under an SPV. And it is effective, but it does takes some time to set up, and it is a legal structure that needs setting up correctly. We took guidance, so we're members of our local chambers and the Federation of Small Businesses. We took guidance from our accountant. We took guidance from our networks, the legal helplines that are available. We took both legal and financial advice when we were setting up Go for Growth, what insurances we need, what policies we need in place, etc., and how to share both the activity and the financial management of Go for Growth. And we are a social enterprise, a registered social enterprise. So we also reflect in our articles of association our social mission and purpose, which is important to us. So the SPV can be a really useful model if you are ready for it. And actually, Go for Growth, we went straight to SPV. We had worked together in various guises. We had a good, strong, known relationship for probably around 6 or 7 years as individuals, which gave us a position of strength to work from. But we did go straight to SPV in the first place. So if we think about crunching the numbers, before you start off, it's important to do the sums. Get yourself a spreadsheet together. It doesn't have to be the most sophisticated spreadsheet you'll ever pull together. But what you're really thinking about is, what are the overhead costs that might be needed in order to set a consortium up, to get it up and running? I've mentioned insurance, banking, administrative resources, who will provide them, how much will you pay for them? All of that needs to be costed. And you might cost that as individual businesses, or you might come together to cost it collaboratively. So you might cost it separately and come together to discuss, or you might actually do the costing exercise together. But effectively, in a lead body model, at least, and even under an SPV, what you're thinking about is sharing equally amongst the consortium partners, especially when you're thinking about overhead costs. And it's really important to do this at early stages, because they'll create difficult conversations to have later on if you don't do it up front. And I can certainly, as Go for Growth, reflect on the need to have those difficult conversations to start with. So we thought about what happens if one of our businesses doesn't want to do this any longer, or one of us as individuals doesn't want to do this any longer. What do we think it will cost? What would we charge? How would we manage that, etc.? So it is really important to be open-minded about some of the challenging conversations that you're likely to have, and to embrace those conversations early on, especially where costs are concerned. Now, I'm not going to say for 1 second, actually, that everybody needs to be accredited to the international standard for managing collaborative working relationships. But there is an awful lot of free help out there to help you navigate the world of collaboration. What I would suggest, if you're thinking about bidding for a contract as a consortium, is that you use some sort of formalized approach to structure your collaboration. The standard will not only help you, but it can also be assuring for the client who is inviting your consortium bid. So using something like the international standard, which is based on 8 principles, and you can see those 8 principles on the screen, it can be a really useful model. It's tried and tested not only in Wales, but right across the UK and the rest of the world. And basically what it's showing us is a process for managing collaborative relationships. I would suggest that we look at this one quite carefully. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see the Institute of Collaborative Working. That, if you click on that link, there's tons of free resources there. They also have a network of great events. So do feel free to have a look, even if you're not considering going for the ISO accreditation. The reality is that when most organisations start to collaborate together, they start where it says working together. And then they think, well, we've got this project, let's get up and running. Who do we need around the table? Let's get started, off they go. What they don't necessarily think about is why we need to collaborate, why collaboration is the right vehicle. What are the individual objectives of each organisation in the collaboration? What are our values and what are our vision? And if we don't start there at the outset, it can come as a bit of a nasty shock later when you find out that actually one of you, for example, could be striving to reduce costs, and that's what's in it for the collaboration. The other one is looking to add value and increase quality. And so if you end up with conflicts or contradictions in that case, if they're not understood at the outset and managed at the outset through conversation, they can inevitably cause issues later on in the relationship. The other big area, of course, is knowledge. What we need to know versus what data we've got or what data we need. We're all surrounded by big data. The reality is that lots of organizations share data for data's sake, but we don't actually put time into analyzing that data. What is it telling us? What should we do with this? What decisions do we make on the back of this data? If in the consortium you decide to start sharing data, or that's going to be a core part of what you do, you need to think about how that's going to help and how it will support the collaboration going forward, and how you'll protect that data, how you'll protect your intellectual property, if you like. Excuse me. So I'd recommend, and certainly Cardiff University would recommend, starting by writing a list of the types of data that you'll need, and then think about and have a discussion about the willingness of all of the partners in the collaboration to share that information. What's really important to you may be quite strategic and confidential for someone else, and vice versa. And it's important to have that conversation because it becomes the intellectual property of the consortium. And so if we don't talk about that from the outset, when we come to the end of the project or the end of the contract, we then don't know what to do with the information and the property assets, the intellectual property assets that we have built. Who owns it? Where does it go? How is it being shared? We've also got, cybersecurity in a virtual digital world. So we've got those issues that we have to think about in terms of our platforms, compatibility of platforms. And I would suggest that it should not be underestimated how important it is to have what could be really uncomfortable conversations, but have them anyway and have them early, have them at the front end of the process. And using a structured process like this means actually it's probably a lot less uncomfortable because it's all part of the process of managing an effective collaborative relationship. You've got assessment internally of each organisation about what your strengths and weaknesses are, etc., to help you create that effective partnership working. And then once you've got together, working together, and you're creating that value, of course, it doesn't stop there. You need to think about how you're going to communicate. So even after you've set up your consortium, if you're fortunate enough to win a contract, the hard work probably continues at that point. Hopefully you've done all those upfront difficult conversations. So the rest should be around building that value, creating that value as you work through the contract. You'll need to think about some of the fundamentals of how you might get together. When is the right time to meet? What's realistic? What's feasible? How many people? In a consortium, there is an issue around dependency. And we'll pick that point up in a second. But that value creation, what we want to get out of the contract, our wish list, it's really important. And that will help us work out how we stay together, how we meet and talk with each other. And importantly, at the outset, you'll also think about your exit strategy. So it's a bit like your prenup, I guess. So we're thinking about the divorce before we get married. But it comes directly out of your knowledge strategy and thinking about the types of knowledge, the IP that you're going to generate together, how you might use that, what happens, is there an end? And if there's an end, what do we do at the end? So what does Cardiff Business School and Dr. Jane Lynch thinks makes the fundamentals of good collaboration? So number one has to be leadership. You need collaboration champions in your organisation. Depending on the size, if you're a small micro sole trader, for example, that might just be you. But whoever it is, it's people or someone that really understands the benefit of collaborative working and is committed to it. You need to understand why you want to collaborate. What's your value proposition around it? What's the real benefit to your organisation of this collaborative effort that you're going to be putting in? And we've talked a lot about uncomfortable early conversations. Don't be put off by them. Have them as soon as possible, particularly now we're working more and more online. Think about your communication behaviours. In a virtual world, it's really difficult. We rely so much on email and they can be so easily misunderstood. You send an email out and you know what your intent is when you're writing it. But that's not necessarily what's interpreted when it's received. Or if you send an email out and you receive radio silence for any particular length of time, it can be a very dangerous thing in collaborative working, as it can in any relationship, to be fair. We misunderstand silence or we misunderstand the intent of an email. And we start to think that there is something broken when there may not be, actually. It might be that the communication was interpreted differently to that it was intended, or that somebody is simply busy and has been unable to come back to us. But those conversations around how will we meet, how will we communicate, what happens if I email you? It's not about putting service level agreements in place, but it is about being open and honest and upfront around how will we talk to each other, what's important to us. And within the consortium, so any contract that's managed through the consortium relationship, it might be for some businesses that it's worth a different amount of overall business. So for one business in the consortium, it could be worth 5% of their annual turnover, whereas for others, it could be worth 60% of their annual turnover. And it's really important to understand that at the outset, because then at least you can understand the context, the level of importance that's going to be placed on those busy times that you get. And again, if you are upfront and open with those communications at the beginning, you can actually think about scenarios of, this is 60% of my business, but only 5% of yours. So actually, when we're busy, you might really struggle because you've got so much going on. How would we deal with that? What would our communication plan be in those busy, challenging times? What happens if we get a complaint, etc., etc.? So that being honest, open, and clear, they're really important features and behaviours within effective collaborative working. It's about exhibiting those right behaviours and building the right culture from day one. And what we see with that is the triple win. So there's a win for you, there's a win for your collaborative partner, and there's a win for the end user of your product and service as well. There's lots of opportunities to be gained here. Collaboration is a tried and tested model, and we know that it can deliver great benefits, both to the organisations within the consortia, but also to the users of that service or goods that are coming out of the collaboration. So in terms of leadership and collaboration, structured collaborative working is a real key to adapting and addressing increasingly complex challenges with collaborative working. And I've said, we are still recovering in some sectors, in some businesses from the pandemic. So it's especially so as we come out of that pandemic. What we've seen is a lot of open innovation. We've seen a lot of businesses coming together, collaborating together, but a lot of the time it's done informally. And absolutely, that can work for a certain amount of time. And actually, Go for Growth as a collaboration, we have informal collaborations with other organisations. But eventually, there comes a point where that either needs to have some structure put into it, or people will inevitably go off and focus on their own business. So if you don't have that structure in place when you need it, it can cause some problems later on. And we are certainly in conversations with who we're collaborating with to put some structure into those things. So we've been doing it for a couple of years. We're at a point where we probably need to firm up some of those things. And so the capability of collaborative leadership is essential in the future. In terms of capabilities, it might be that you're a very small business, it's you or nobody, because there isn't anybody else to send to meetings, to send to communications, to do the comms, to deliver the contract. If that is the case, we would encourage you to think about your own skill set and be honest about it. Do you need to develop any of your own skills, negotiation skills, communication skills, whatever it is? Can you build trust? Can you manage trust within the collaboration? All of those things are really important to how we manage change and how we lead change. And of course, collaborative working is a change to how you have been working before. And so that building trust is a crucial dimension. And of course, as it does in our personal lives, it takes time to build trust. It can take years to build it, but seconds to lose it. So we need to think really carefully about and actually never underestimate the importance of trust. Developing the right competencies, behaviours, the right culture that engenders a trusted environment is really important, and it needs to be continued as situations change within the business working environment. Our ways of working are changing. They'll continue to change. And that means our behaviours will change and need to change as we need to communicate and engage with each other. And in Go for Growth, 5 years into our SPV, we are both the same business, but also a different business. And we have, because we have a trusted relationship, I can definitely vouch from lived experience that it has stood us in good stead, especially when we've had to have challenging conversations about how we move forward, our growth strategy, our plans, what feels right for the business. Bringing in our specific skill sets, our experiences, our knowledge base, and through that respectful, trusted relationship, using all of that to the betterment of our business. And I don't know about you, but I spend almost, it seems like almost every minute of every day on some sort of virtual platform, Teams or Zoom. I have my favorites that I use for different types of projects, but I am also aware, and we need to be aware of the challenges that we face with online working and thinking about how we'll be able to use it effectively. What it does, of course, is open up opportunities for you to create a consortium with someone who's not even in your locality. They might not even be in your country, actually. It does mean that the landscape for collaboration is, well, it's as broad as you can think it. So there is no longer a barrier to working together in proximity. And again, my colleagues and I, we sit in 3 different countries: England, Scotland, and actually overseas. So we manage to drive our business, run our business. We manage to collaborate through our SPV, even though we are very rarely together in person. And we've always been far flung about. So the digital world can be really useful, but it brings about its own set of challenges. And that advancement of technology, I think, will continue to improve our collaborative working. There are lots of platforms and functionalities that make co-authoring documents dead easy. Innovation sessions, creative development workshops, all can be done collaboratively using technology. So I think, we can embrace the metaverse to help us work out and access talent in the marketplace that will help us work through collaboration for our business. And just finally, before I tell you a little bit about Go for Growth and how we might be able to help, we'll talk about the challenges. Oh, I've gone too far. So like anything, collaboration brings challenges as well as it brings opportunities. Collaboration does carry a risk if it isn't managed well. So think about your client whose contract it is that you're going to be fulfilling through the consortium. Through your bid submission, you'll be assuring them that you will be as seamless as if you are one organisation. So think about the model for that. The lead body model could be useful in that. If you have a loose, informal structure for managing the consortium, it will almost certainly cause problems later on. Collaboration takes time. So we talked about that, thinking about collaboration at least 6 months in advance of putting a submission in together. So if this is something that you want to do over the next 6 to 12 months, now is the time to start talking about how you would collaborate and who you would collaborate with. Effective communication, as I've mentioned, thinking about the time, frequency, how you meet. We have technology that allows us to do that. We can call our teams virtually in the same way that we could go and drop at someone's desk using Teams and Zoom, etc. We have in Go for Growth weekly Teams meetings for an hour, and every quarter we have a strategy session. And we'll do that in person if we can all be in the same country. If we can't, we'll do that virtually as well. But we, from the very beginning, set up our stall in terms of how will we talk, what are the mediums that we'll use, how often will we do it, what will be the subject matter. And I've talked about that trust being there from the beginning. It certainly was with us. Finance, even insurance, TUPE rules, again, if these things apply for opportunities that you're going for, if TUPE would be at play, the transfer of undertakings, protection of employment legislation, it's a complex piece of legislation, but you would be effectively seeing people transfer into your business if you want a contract where TUPE applies. Take some advice from your support agency. That could be Go for Growth. Although for things like TUPE, we would always recommend legal advice because it is a complicated piece of legislation. We can always connect you with specialists if you need it. Local chambers, Federation of Small Businesses are always good beds to help and support. And remember that this is about long-term thinking. So it's a long-term strategy. We're going to be thinking about this over months, not over days or weeks. And I'm just going to stop for a second and see if we've got any questions before I move on. Thank you for that introduction in the chat. That's great. There's nothing in the Q&A just yet. I have got a second opportunity for questions. Whilst you think about anything that you might have to ask, I'll just tell you a little bit about Go for Growth and how we might be able to help. So if you're thinking about the public sector, and especially if you're new to the public sector, or you want to sense check how ready you are for public sector as an organisation, it might form part of your SWOT framework that you do when you're thinking about collaboration. We have something called the Public Sector Supply Ready Accreditation. It's free of charge, and it will always be free of charge, as is all of the help and support that Go for Growth offers to the marketplace. And effectively what it will do is help you understand the basics involved in the public procurement process. It would guide you through the standard selection questionnaire. We are in the process of updating that to reflect the procurement specific questionnaire, which is now in force following the go live of the Procurement Act Regulations 2023 in February. If you find that you've got gaps, there's lots of embedded help and resources in the actual PSSR itself, but also wraparound support from Go for Growth. It comes with 12 hours of continued professional development, and you'll get a CPD certificate for that, which can be admissible in bids under skills development, social value. What you will get once you graduate the accreditation is a certificate, the logo that you see on the screen, social media banners. If you promote that on social media, we'll re-promote that for you. And it can be a way of showing your customer that you're invested, that you're prepared, that you're ready to take part. It can just help with that upskilling or sense checking, double checking that you've got all of your tools in your toolkit for general procurement, public procurement competition. So it can be a useful tool. There is a case study on our YouTube channel of an organisation called Adarak, who have gone through the accreditation. And as a result of that, and some of the upskilling that it gave them, they were able to successfully join a framework and work with new clients as part of that framework. So please don't take my word for it. Do have a look at the case studies that we've got on YouTube. Have a look at the PSSR if that could be useful for you. The link to it is on the screen. So have a look at that if that would be helpful. And then there's also some resources. So if you go to our website, go to our membership resources page, there's over 200 resources in there. We have an AI-powered online assistant, Rosa. If you type into Rosa what it is that you're looking for, Rosa will return the information to you. You can search through all 200 if you want to. There's filters on there, but Rosa is a useful tool for making sure that you get to the right information that you need as and when you need it. The final thing to say is, if you'd like to stay in touch with us, please do feel free to do so. We don't spam. We send our newsletter out once a month that hopefully has useful public sector type information in there if you're thinking about working in the public sector. And that was it from me. So what I'll do is I'll stop sharing and then I'll see if there's anything in the chat. So yes, I will be sending out the slides. So the slides and a copy of the recording will come out to you also. So you'll get everything that you've seen today, and anything that is a link in there will be live through the slide deck. So you can literally click through into the slide deck. Have a look at the PSSR if you're interested in it. You can take as much time as you want doing it. There is no time limit to completing it. The accreditation lasts a year. And then the renewal process for re-accreditation is even lighter touch than the accreditation in the beginning. Effectively, what we ask you at year 2 is, can you have a look through all your information? Has anything changed? Have you got anything that you want to add to it? And what we ask for is an email of confirmation to say that the information is accurate, current and up to date. We'll then reassess it. So actually the administrative burden falls to us more than it does to you. So have a look at the PSSR and see what you think of it. We are always happy to take feedback. Our job is to add value, to be useful, to be helpful. And there's more than one way to do that. So if you've got any feedback, even if that's a criticism, please feel free to let us know. We would really like to make sure that we are giving as much help as we possibly can. Thank you for your comments. I hope that was useful today. My aim always is to get the slide deck and the recording out within 48 hours. So hopefully you will have that by end of play tomorrow. At the very latest, that would be by close of play Monday. It will go to everybody that's registered. So, and if I know we've cantered through a ton of stuff today, my calendar is an open calendar, so you can book a team session with me for 30 minutes. If you just want to have a coffee and a chat and a chinwag, my door is always open. Please do feel free to get in touch. We're here to help. Thank you ever so much for joining this morning, and I hope everybody has a good rest of their Thursday. Thank you ever so much. See you next time.